The countdown has officially begun. And the world is holding its breath as the heartbeat of the Persian Gulf grows increasingly erratic. There are exactly 48 hours left before a global geopolitical catastrophe of unprecedented proportions could ignite. The latest breaking news from Tehran has sent a chilling shockwave through the spines of world leaders and international energy markets alike. Iran has issued a deadly and irreversible ultimatum to its neighbors across the Gulf. The threat is simple yet utterly devastating. Expel all United States military bases immediately, or prepare to watch your most vital oil fields and energy infrastructure go up in flames. This is no longer a standard war of words on the diplomatic stage. It is a life and death gamble where every move is measured in millions of lives and the very stability of the global economy. To understand how we reached this precipice of total war, we must look back at the harrowing events of the past few days. Following reports of the Iranian Supreme Leader's death, which were confirmed by Israeli intelligence and validated by the administration of President Donald Trump, the situation spiraled out of control. Precision strike lasting only 50 seconds on a deep underground command complex in Tehran did more than just eliminate the most powerful figures in the Iranian military apparatus. It shattered all the unwritten rules of the shadow war between Washington and Tehran. This event created a dangerous power vacuum, and the most radical elements within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have now seized the reins of power, ready to execute the most violent retaliations the world has ever seen. The tension is not confined to the borders of Iran. In capitals such as Riyadh, Kuwait City, and Abu Dhabi, emergency meetings are being held throughout the night. The Gulf states are caught in a terrifying dilemma. On one side is the military protection of the United States, the shield that has kept them secure for decades. And on the other is the fury of an Iran backed into a corner with a massive arsenal of missiles ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. Geopolitical analysts suggest that Tehran is employing a porcupine strategy, ready to sting anyone who touches it. By demanding that neighboring countries choose between an American military base and the survival of their oil fields, Iran is striking directly at the Achilles heel of the world economy. If the oil fields in this region are attacked, oil prices could skyrocket to over $200 a barrel in just a few hours, triggering the worst global economic recession in modern history. Meanwhile, on the streets of Tehran and other major Iranian cities, the situation is one of total chaos. Carpet bombing runs by United States and Israeli forces continue to target strategic locations. But this appears to only be fueling the fires of hatred. The Iranian people face a painful choice: hope for regime change to find freedom or stand with their current rulers against foreign invasion. President Trump has issued a direct appeal to the Iranian citizens, stating that this is their only chance in generations to reclaim their country. However, amid the falling bombs and overwhelming fear, the voice of peace is being drowned out by the roar of jet engines and the explosion of cruise missiles. The game has changed, and time is running out for everyone involved. The ultimatum delivered by the remnants of the Iranian leadership is not merely a request. It is a declaration of total regional suicide if their demands are not met. Across the waters of the Persian Gulf, in the gleaming skyscrapers of Dubai and the sprawling palaces of Riyadh, the realization is sinking in that the era of relative stability is over. Tehran's message, broadcasted through every available diplomatic and clandestine channel, is chillingly precise. They have given the Gulf monarchies exactly 48 hours to shut down every American military installation on their soil. From the massive Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which serves as the forward headquarters of United States Central Command, to the naval facilities in Bahrain and the sprawling logistics hubs in Kuwait, Iran is demanding a total American withdrawal. The price of refusal is the systematic destruction of the very foundation of these nations' wealth, their oil and gas infrastructure. This is the ultimate nightmare scenario for the global energy market. For decades, the world has relied on the security architecture provided by the United States military to keep the lifeblood. of the global economy flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. But now that very security architecture has become a magnet for catastrophe. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, now operating under a decentralized and highly aggressive command structure following the elimination of their top generals, has deployed hundreds of mobile missile launchers along its southern coastline. These are not just any missiles. They are precision-guided systems designed to bypass sophisticated missile defense batteries and strike the heart of oil processing plants, desalination facilities, and export terminals. The threat is clear. If Iran is to be dismantled by American and Israeli air power, they will ensure that the rest of the region is dragged down into the abyss with them. The strategic calculation behind this ultimatum is as brilliant as it is terrifying. By targeting the oil fields, Iran is holding the entire world hostage. They know that even the mere threat of such an attack has already sent insurance premiums for oil tankers through the roof and caused panic on the trading floors of New York and London. But the true target of this psychological warfare is the internal stability of the Gulf states themselves. The leaders in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi are now facing an impossible choice that could lead to the end of their dynasties. If they comply with Iran and expel the Americans, they lose their primary security guarantor and leave themselves vulnerable to future Iranian hegemony. If they refuse, they risk seeing their decades of economic progress evaporated in a single night of fire and explosions. Military intelligence reports indicate that Iran's Mosquito fleet of fast-attack crafts is already swarming near the most sensitive maritime choke points. These small, agile vessels are equipped with anti-ship missiles and are capable of laying sophisticated naval mines that could turn the Persian Gulf into a graveyard for commercial shipping. Furthermore, the Iranian cyber warfare units, which have remained largely dormant in the early hours of the conflict, are now believed to be preparing massive strikes against the digital control systems of regional power grids and water treatment plants. This is a multidimensional assault intended to paralyze the Gulf states from within, forcing them to choose between their alliance with Washington and their own survival. As the clock ticks down toward the 48-hour mark, the silence from many Gulf capitals is deafening, reflecting the sheer gravity of a decision that will redefine the map of the Middle East forever. The response from Washington has been nothing short of ironclad defiance. Inside the White House, President Donald Trump has reportedly brushed aside the Iranian ultimatum, viewing it as the desperate gasp of a dying regime rather than a credible military threat. However, the Pentagon's actions tell a much more cautious and calculated story. In the hours following the announcement of the 48-hour deadline, the United States military has initiated one of the largest rapid deployments of naval and air assets seen since the dawn of the 21st century. 2 additional carrier strike groups are currently steaming toward the North Arabian Sea, joining the massive force already stationed in the region. The message to Tehran is unmistakable. Any attack on a United States ally or a global energy facility will be met with a level of force that would effectively erase the Iranian military from the map of history. Despite this outward display of overwhelming strength, the strategic reality on the ground is fraught with extreme complexity. Protecting hundreds of miles of oil pipelines, dozens of massive refineries, and thousands of offshore drilling platforms is a logistical nightmare that no military in the world can fully guarantee. The United States Air Force has surged its presence at Prince Sultan Air Base and other regional hubs, deploying advanced F-22 stealth fighters to establish a permanent combat air patrol over the most critical energy corridors. Yet, the threat from Iran's drones, swarms, and low-flying cruise missiles remains a persistent shadow. These assets are notoriously difficult to track and intercept, especially when launched in massive, coordinated waves designed to saturate even the most advanced Aegis and Patriot defense systems. In Israel, the atmosphere is one of grim determination. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet have remained in constant communication with the White House, coordinating what many believe will be a massive preemptive strike if the 48-hour window closes without a de-escalation. The Israeli defense, Forces have shifted their focus from the northern border to preparing for long-range operations against Iran's remaining nuclear and industrial heartlands. For Israel, this is an existential moment. They view the current chaos as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to permanently neutralize the Iranian threat. Regardless of the immediate cost to regional stability, the rhetoric coming out of Jerusalem is focused on a total victory, leaving no room for the diplomatic off-ramps that have characterized previous Middle Eastern crises. Meanwhile, a massive humanitarian crisis is unfolding as the United States government issues urgent orders for all American nationals to evacuate the Middle East immediately. From the oil fields of eastern Saudi Arabia to the corporate offices in downtown Dubai, thousands of expatriates are scrambling to find any available flight out of the region. The closure of major airports and the cancellation of dozens of international flight paths have turned the region's transport hubs into scenes of absolute desperation. Within the United States, public opinion is sharply divided. While some segments of the population see this as a necessary move to end a decades-long conflict, others are terrified of being dragged into another endless war in the Middle East, one that could potentially involve nuclear-armed powers or lead to a global economic collapse. The domestic political landscape in America is also boiling over. Opponents of the administration are questioning the legality of the initial strikes that killed the Iranian leadership, while supporters argue that the world is a safer place without the architects of regional terror. President Trump, however, remains focused on his narrative of liberation. He has continued to tweet and broadcast messages directly to the Iranian people, promising them a future of prosperity and friendship with the West if they rise up now. But as the sun sets over the Persian Gulf on the first day of the ultimatum, the only thing that seems certain is that the world is standing at the edge of a great unknown. The machinery of war is fully engaged, and the diplomatic channels that once served as a safety valve have been completely severed. The next 24 hours will determine whether the 21st century enters a period of unprecedented conflict or a radical new era of regional realignment. As the shadows lengthen over the Persian Gulf and the ticking of the clock becomes a deafening roar, the tactical reality on the ground has already begun to shift in ways that few military planners anticipated. While the ultimatum focuses on the next 48 hours, the first wave of Iranian retaliation has already left a trail of desolation that contradicts the narrative of a swift and clean American victory. In Israel, the once vibrant streets of Tel Aviv and the strategic port of Haifa have been transformed into eerie ghost cities. The constant wail of air raid sirens and the thunderous impact of long-range ballistic missiles have forced millions into underground shelters, despite the vaunted reputation of the Iron Dome and aero defense systems. The sheer volume of the Iranian salvos has occasionally overwhelmed the interceptors, leading to scenes of destruction that have been largely scrubbed from international news feeds due to strict military censorship. This is no longer a localized skirmish. It is a systematic attempt to paralyze the most advanced military power in the region. The Iranian strategy relies heavily on its network of regional proxies, a force that has been meticulously cultivated for decades. From the rugged mountains of southern Lebanon, Hezbollah has unleashed a barrage of sophisticated anti-tank missiles and precision drones, pinning down significant portions of the Israeli defense forces. In the south, despite months of intense combat, the remaining infrastructure of Hamas continues to launch sporadic but psychologically devastating rocket attacks. These groups are acting as the pincers of a much larger strategic trap, designed to bleed the United States and its allies dry through 1,000 small cuts, while the main Iranian military remains poised for its final suicidal gambit. The realization is beginning to dawn on Washington that this might not be a repeat of the rapid collapse seen in previous conflicts, but rather a descent into a quagmire that mirrors the worst years of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. At the heart of this escalating chaos lies the debate over whether the strike on Tehran was a masterstroke of military genius or the single biggest strategic mistake in American history. Supporters of the administration point to the elimination of the supreme leader as a necessary step to liberate the Iranian people and end the threat of a nuclear-armed rogue state. They highlight President Trump's direct appeals to the Iranian youth as a catalyst for a democratic revolution that could rewrite the history of the Middle East. However, critics and seasoned geopolitical analysts warn that the United States may have fundamentally miscalculated the resilience of the Iranian state and the depths of its nationalist fervor. Instead of a Venezuelan-style collapse of the regime, they see an Iranian population that is increasingly unified by the sight of foreign bombs falling on their cities. The liberation narrative is being challenged by the grim reality of carpet bombing and the rising toll of civilian casualties in cities like Minab, where reports of strikes on schools have sent shockwaves through the international community. The economic consequences of this miscalculation are already manifesting in the global markets. The oil crescent of the Gulf is now under the direct shadow of Iranian missile batteries, and the fear of a total shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz has turned the world's energy supply into a weapon of war. Major shipping firms have already suspended operations in the region, and the insurance costs for any vessel brave enough to enter the Gulf have become prohibitive. As the first day of the 48-hour ultimatum nears its end, the global community is facing the terrifying prospect of a world without Middle Eastern oil. This is the leverage that Tehran is using to force the Gulf monarchies into a corner. They are betting that the threat of total economic ruin will eventually outweigh the security promises of the United States. In this high-stakes game of geopolitical poker, the Iranian leadership is prepared to lose everything, provided they take their enemies down with them. The next 24 hours will reveal whether the American shield can truly hold against a nation that has decided it has nothing left to lose. With less than 12 hours remaining on the clock, the geopolitical landscape has shifted from a state of high tension to one of absolute systemic fracture. In the halls of the United Nations, the atmosphere is heavy with the stench of a failed diplomacy that could not keep pace with the speed of hypersonic missiles and digital warfare. The global economy is no longer just reacting to rumors. It is currently undergoing a violent contraction. Brent crude oil has surged past $150 a barrel, and some analysts predict it could double by the time the sun rises over the Strait of Hormuz. For the manufacturing giants of East Asia, particularly China and India, this is not just an energy crisis, but a threat to their national stability. Beijing has reportedly initiated a series of high-level clandestine communications with both Tehran and Washington, attempting to broker a last-minute freeze. However, the Iranian leadership, feeling they have already lost their head of state and their dignity, seems uninterested in the traditional carrots of international diplomacy. Inside the Gulf Cooperation Council, the mask of unity is beginning to crack under the immense pressure of the Iranian ultimatum. While Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have publicly maintained their alliance with the United States, smaller member states are reportedly considering the unthinkable. Sources within the Kuwaiti and Qatari governments suggest there are intense internal debates about declaring a status of active neutrality, which would involve restricting United States military operations from their territory to avoid becoming targets of Iranian fire. This is exactly what Tehran intended: to use the threat of total destruction to dismantle the American security umbrella from the inside out. If even one Gulf nation blinks and requests the Americans to stand down, the entire strategic architecture of the Middle East, built over 70 years, could collapse in a single afternoon. The United States State Department has responded with frantic diplomatic pressure, warning its allies that any sign of weakness will only embolden the radical elements now controlling Iran's missile silos. As the deadline looms, the tactical situation in the waters of the Gulf has reached a boiling point. The United States Navy has declared a massive maritime exclusion zone. Yet Iranian midget submarines and autonomous underwater vehicles continue to play a deadly game of cat and mouse with American sonar arrays. In Washington, the political stakes have reached a fever pitch. Reports are surfacing of a dead-hand-style system within the Iranian military, It's an automated retaliatory protocol that would launch the country's entire remaining missile arsenal. If the central command is permanently severed, this means that even a total American victory on the battlefield could trigger a global environmental and economic apocalypse. The world is realizing that Iran has not just prepared for a war, they have prepared for an end-of-the-world scenario where no one wins. Amidst this high-level maneuvering, the human cost continues to mount. The evacuation of Western nationals has turned into a chaotic retreat, with thousands stranded at desert outposts as commercial aviation corridors are shut down by the threat of long-range surface-to-air missiles. In the United States, the initial surge of patriotic fervor is being replaced by a mounting sense of dread as the reality of a global energy blackout becomes a distinct possibility. Gas prices at American pumps have already jumped by $2 in a single day, causing localized panic and long lines at stations from California to Maine. This is the total war that the 21st century was supposed to have outgrown. Yet here we are, watching the minutes tick away toward a confrontation that could redefine the value of a human life and the price of a gallon of oil for decades to come, as the final minutes of the 40i Tower ultimatum bleed away into history. The world stands at a crossroads that will define the next century. The silence across the Persian Gulf is heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of jet engines and the rhythmic waves hitting the shore. This is the moment where theory becomes reality, where the geopolitical chess game ends and the visceral consequences of war begin. In Washington, the Situation Room is a hive of grim activity as advisors present the final options to the leadership. The choice is no longer about winning or losing a specific battle, but about managing the fallout of a region that has been fundamentally broken. The American administration remains steadfast in its belief that the removal of the old guard in Tehran will eventually lead to a more stable world. But the path to that stability is now paved with fire and uncertainty. For the people of Iran, the expiration of the deadline brings a mixture of terror and a desperate flickering hope. In the basements of Tehran, families huddle together, wondering if the next sound they hear will be the roar of a liberation movement or the whistle of a cruise missile. The calls for an uprising have been met with a complex response, while many long for the freedoms promised by the West. Others are paralyzed by the immediate need for survival in a land where the infrastructure of daily life is disintegrating. The tragic reports of civilian casualties serve as a haunting reminder that there is no such thing as a clean war. The humanitarian price of this strategic shift is already being paid in the lives of those who had no part in the decision to issue ultimatums or launch precision strikes. In the Gulf capitals, the 48 hours have been a transformative experience. The realization that their safety can no longer be guaranteed by any single power has sparked a new, more cautious era of regional diplomacy. Whether or not the missiles fly, the relationship between the Gulf monarchies and the United States has been altered forever. The vulnerability of their oil fields has been exposed, and the economic model that built their glittering cities is being reevaluated under the shadow of total war. The global markets, too, are preparing for a new reality. Even if a full-scale energy collapse is avoided in the final seconds, the era of cheap, reliable energy is a memory of the past. The world must now grapple with the consequences of a Middle East that is no longer a stable gas station, but a volatile battlefield. As the clock hits zero, the narrative of the 50-second strike that started this chain of events will be analyzed by historians for generations. Was it a masterstroke of decisive action that prevented a nuclear catastrophe? Or was it the opening act of a tragedy that the world could have avoided? The answer likely lies somewhere in the complex gray areas of human history. As we watch the first reports of the deadline's expiration filter through our screens, we are reminded that power is not just the ability to destroy, but the responsibility to rebuild. The fires in the Gulf may eventually be extinguished, and the political maps may be redrawn. But the memory of these 48 hours will remain a stark warning of how quickly the world can descend from peace into the abyss. The script of the old Middle East has been burned to ashes, and as the smoke clears, can only hope that whatever is written next is guided by a wisdom that has been so sorely lacking in these final desperate hours.